At 5:15 on June 19th, 1984, David Bocks committed suicide. In a small town called Finale, Ohio, sitting on 1,000 acres of land, there was a huge production plant. The Feed Materials Production Center is where most of the people in Finale and surrounding towns worked. From the outside, it looked like a dog food plant, but its real name was National Lead of Ohio, NLO, and it was owned by the Department of Energy. It was one of the few factories in the U.S. that produced high-grade uranium for nuclear weapons. In the fall of 1984, around 200 tons of radioactive plume escaped the plant, contaminating the air and nearby water. But wait, who was David Bocks? He was hired into the plant as a pipe fitter, but ultimately in charge of plant safety. He was a divorced father of 2 daughters, and despite being divorced, he remained on good terms with his ex-wife and his kids. He was a recovering alcoholic with a brief history of mental illness, during which he attempted to take his own life. Every work night, David would meet Harry Easterling at a midway point, a local Crystal's, and then they would ride share the rest of the way. They worked the midnight to 7 a.m. shift, which was reserved for maintenance and security only. On the night of David Bocks' death, he would talk to Harry about grocery shopping, an upcoming vacation where he would take his kids to Disney World, and his new lunchbox. Easterling and Bocks would attend a safety meeting at midnight before getting their assignments, donning their tool belts, and getting to work. David Bocks would unlock his tool chest, remove his tools, and leave his keys in the lock on top of the box as he always did. Please take note of this. It's important. The rest of the night is a little hazy, but here are a few things that we do know. Around 4 a.m., David would be seen sitting in a parked truck with his supervisor, Charlie Schaus. They were smoking and having a somewhat heated conversation. Despite being hot and humid, the windows of the truck were rolled up. Shortly after 4 a.m., a coworker would see David heading to Plant 4, despite being assigned to Plant 8. At 5:15, the temperature in a furnace in Plant 6 drops, and then again a few minutes later. Let's talk about this furnace. It was a large rectangular vat that burned at 1300 degrees. Inside was a molten lava type of substance, which was actually salt. It stood about 6 foot tall and had a ladder next to it that led up to a small hole. The hole was in place to allow you to insert things into the furnace with minimal risk. Back to our story. In the morning, they would attend another safety meeting. Only this time, David Bocks was not there. Harry Easterling noted that David's keys were still in his toolbox, so he must be in the plant working overtime. After several attempts to find him, Harry finally gave up and left the plant, but not before leaving a note for David with security. At 7:30 a.m., a plant production worker from Plant 6 would report to their supervisor that his furnace had a sticky substance all over it and was emitting a funny odor. That employee would be told not to worry about it and to get back to work. The very next night, Harry Easterling would show up at Crystal's at 11 p.m. to meet David, as they always did. David's car was there, but when Harry got out of his truck and leaned on David's car, he noticed that it was cold, as was the hood. It had been there all day. It had obviously not moved. When Harry arrived at the plant, he told his story to security, and David Bocks was officially declared missing. At the following safety meeting, Harry would witness David's lock and keys for the last time, when the supervisor, Charlie Schaus, would lock the box and keep David's keys. The police were called, and the sticky furnace would be shut down. It would take 3 days to cool enough for anyone to sort through the remains. When it was finally sorted out, they would find a steel toe from a boot, what was left of a walkie-talkie, parts from a set of glasses, a piece of metal wire twisted into 3 circles, and David Bocks' keys. Schaus claims that he was talking to David at the time of the temperature drop at 5:15, and that it was a group discussion with Harry Easterling, and that David seemed despondent. Harry denies both of these claims. Charlie Schaus was never a suspect. Keeping in mind that David's official cause of death was suicide, let's explore this. So David Bocks inserted himself into a very small opening into a 1300-degree furnace. Okay? Let's say he went head first. Going in head first would have been impossible, or they would have found the remainder of his body hanging outside the vat, having died as soon as the heat reached his brain and boiled the liquids inside of his skull. So this leaves the shimmy theory. He went in legs first, shimmying himself into the opening on top of the 1300-degree furnace, all the while physically being melted by 1300-degree molten salt. But according to the sheriff's department, he jumped. That's right, a perfectly timed, perfectly aimed jump. A jump so perfect that a grown man fit into a slot in a furnace just a bit larger than a sheet of paper. No screams were heard as he did this horrific act. So, who wanted David Bocks dead? David knew about many of the plant's safety hazards and had planned to blow the whistle. He died 3 months before the plant leaked 200 tons of nuclear dust into the air. Negligent plant supervisor? It was rumored that there was a lot of drug deals at the NLO. Did David witness one? Another rumor states that David's ex-wife was dating someone that worked in the plant. Was there a love triangle? The night that David died, a man named Eddie Gibson was on a suspension because David had reported him for sleeping on the job. The same night, Eddie Gibson's motorcycle was spotted at the plant. But when the police went to his house, the motorcycle was inoperable. The lead went no further. No further questions were asked. Revenge? I have questions. What were David and Charlie having a secret discussion about that night in his truck? Why were the police so lax on this investigation? And most importantly, how did Harry see David's keys on his toolbox at 7 a.m. and then again at 11 p.m. if they had went into the furnace with David's body at 5 a.m. the previous night? I don't believe that these questions will ever be answered. David's remains will be put into a sealed drum and shipped to Nevada to be stored with other radioactive material. His family couldn't even have a funeral. The site of the NLO is now a nature preserve, but it is so radioactive that it remains uninhabitable. I would like to submit one last piece of information. Do you remember the braided wire? The one that was braided into 3 circles that they found inside the vat? One of David's coworkers suggested that David was knocked unconscious or killed, and his body was lowered into the furnace. Let's explore this for a moment. As I explained before, the vat has a lid so large that you have to use a mobile hoist to pick it up and move it. So what if David was led into Plant 6, knocked unconscious or killed, braided wire placed around his feet or wrists, and using the mobile hoist, his body was lowered into the open furnace and the lid replaced? Sometime later that evening, David's keys would be thrown into the vat as well. The keys that were held by Charlie Schaus. These theories intrigue me, but only one stands out for me. David walking in on a drug deal is merely speculation. David's ex-wife having relations with someone in the plant, again, rumors and speculation. And even the Eddie Gibson thing, although investigated poorly, only seems like a maybe to me. But speaking from a standpoint of mostly circumstantial evidence, no one sticks out more than Charlie Schaus, a man who would have been in danger of losing his job and position in life if David blew the whistle on the safety issues in the plant. A man who was seen having a heated discussion with David an hour before David, committed suicide. A man who had possession of David's keys 17 hours after David disappeared. Those keys that would end up inside of the vat. From here, I'll let you draw your own conclusions. I would like to invite you to dive further down the rabbit hole. Amber Hunt and Amanda Rossman are creators of the podcast Accused. They did an entire season on this topic alone. And if you really want some hardcore details, I suggest you find it on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcast. It's extremely well done and very interesting. I'm grateful for them responding to me with some content that was pertinent to the story. Thank you both, and thank you for listening. J Mac, out.